New video shows film crew scrambling to escape oncoming train. This video shows the terrifying moment a Hollywood train crew fled from the oncoming train that took the life of 27-year-old Sarah Jones last February.
Accidents are no stranger to Hollywood. In fact, most of the films that we consume day in and day out are bound to have a few mishaps here and there. But those mishaps can quickly turn from just a mistake that made the final cut to a deadly on-set accident. This is quite the topic, so I'll start by easing you in with a movie that I'm sure you have all heard about, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. But just before we get to that, I'd like to take a second to talk about the newest drink that has been fueling my late night gaming sessions and endless hours of editing. GFUEL, their new Dream Demon flavor inspired by Nightmare on Elm Street, has become one of my favorites. Each drink is 0 sugar, 0 calories, and 0 regret. It is honestly one of the best drinks that I've had in a very, very long time. And there's an abundance of flavors to choose from. So much in fact that I gave each one a try to figure out what my favorites were. And no, I didn't drink all of these in the same day. I did pace them out over the course of a month, as one should with any energy drink. While I highly recommend the Dream Demon and Pac-Man pellet flavor, I know most of you have different tastes, so I'll be leaving a document below detailing the flavor of each drink as I tasted it and what I liked about them. I did give them scores, but that's more for a personal preference of mine. I'm sure what is a 10 out of 10 for me will end up being a 7 out of 10 for you. And if energy cans aren't your style, try out their energy formula. It's a slight bump in calories at 15 calories per serving, but it tastes just as good without that energy drink bite. The tubs overall are a pretty great choice when it comes to GFUEL, at least from my personal experience. You can get around 40 servings out of one tub, which is a great bang for your buck. But if you're more interested in the cans or anything else on the website, make sure to use code Theorist at checkout for a nice 20% off your cart. So if you want to support the channel and you want a new drink to start off the winter season, go ahead and check out the link below. Thank you to GFUEL for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get back to talking about the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Released in 1984, this film shocked the world with its depiction of a real-life story adapted to film.
Some young man, usually of Southeast Asian origin, had been reported to have died in the middle of a nightmare. And the first two I clipped and kept without thinking too much about it, and then the third one had really the nub of a story in it.
A nub of a story there truly was, seeing as the original Nightmare on Elm Street received critical acclaim upon its release, becoming the sole reason for people to be afraid of falling asleep, never choosing to hold back on any of the blood and guts. But it was this decision that almost led to one of the most disastrous mishaps on the set of any film. This mishap took place during the scene where Glenn is swooped away by Freddy and presumably murdered. The part of this scene that we're talking about today happens a few seconds after Glenn is pulled into the bed. There is this wondrous shot where blood shoots out like a fountain, getting all over the room and leaving an absolute mess. This practical effect took a lot of manpower to create. I mean, judging by the shot, you can probably imagine just how much work went into this, because everything you are seeing is really happening on screen. According to Wes Craven and some crew members, this shot was done using a rotating room. For those who care, the room was initially created for another death in the movie. That is the first on-screen death with Tina, the one where she is dragged around the ceiling. They reused that same room for this shot, only this time they kept the room flipped upside down with Wes Craven strapped to a camera chair filming the entire spectacle. I imagine it looked something like this, with Wes Craven strapped to a chair in the room with a hole through the bed that allowed the crew to pour in the fake blood from the top so it could flow through for the shot. All was going according to plan except when they called action. A few oversights led to an incredible disaster. As the blood pulled out, it immediately hit the light on top, which apparently electrocuted the person pouring in the blood. The blood was also so heavy and there was so much of it that it caused the room to become off balance. Suddenly, cables and rigging that held the room together started to chaotically rip out, causing the room to begin rolling towards the cast and crew. People began leaping out of the way, blood splattering everywhere and on everyone, thanks to a window that was open in the rolling room. Wes Craven explained that from his perspective, the blood came in, a bunch of huge flashes and sparks went about, and then just total darkness, staying nearly suspended in the dark for 20 minutes covered in this fake blood. Again, this is just the beginning of today's video, as no one was actually hurt during this horrific incident, but at the same time, that cannot be said for those further down on the list.
Who was driving it?
I don't know.
Curtis! It's coming after us!
If you haven't seen Maximum Overdrive, I'll catch you up to speed. This movie is well regarded for being one of the worst movies you can watch. The kind of thing you only put on to laugh at how truly bad it was. But behind all those laughs and belly aches lies one of the most obscure on-set film accidents that changed the life of one member of the cast and crew. Armando Iannucci was hired onto the team of Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive as the director of photography. It was his job to bring his over 30 years of filming experience to aid in the production of this film. Only one problem: Iannucci didn't speak English very well. All the while, it was Stephen King's first time ever directing. And seeing as Stephen King was coming onto set coked out of his mind every day, it's clear to see how this accident might have happened. Maximum Overdrive, in a nutshell, is about machines coming to life that murder people. One of those machines was a killer lawnmower. And while that seems a bit silly to say out loud, I gotta give him credit. That is a killer lawnmower. The scene that was to use this lawnmower involved it coming at the screen, meaning the camera would be placed in front of it to catch this specific shot. Nothing too crazy, but it was made crazy by the king himself, who ignored people's pleas to take the blades off the lawnmower because he wanted it to look authentic and scary. And scary it was. When the scene was shot, the lawnmower took off a bit faster than expected and came into contact with a piece of wood that was used to prop up the camera filming it. Thanks to the blade still being on it, chunks of wooden pieces were shot out, with a few splinters flying directly into Armando Iannucci's eye. It's reported that Iannucci never recovered and was left without one eye for the remainder of his life. And this gets far worse when you realize exactly what his job was: a cinematographer. Thankfully, this story has a bit of a resolution to it, as Armando Iannucci filed a lawsuit for nearly $18 million, deciding in 1992 to settle this dispute outside of court for $975,000, which in my opinion is a pretty low price to pay for losing your eye in such a manner. The ocean. Quite possibly one of the most terrifying places to visit, considering the fact that we know literally nothing about it. This is why it was incredibly exciting and scary that the director for 1931's The Viking was dead set on filming out in the icy waters of Canada. We've touched on this before in my earlier videos on film accidents, but this was the 1930s, well before any kind of regulations were made for the safety of cast and crew on any film set. Prior to its eventual release of The Viking, the director Verrick Frissell organized a private screening of the film. While the initial cut seemed to please Frissell and the friends that watched it with him, he felt that the movie was lacking in shots of the beautiful icy wastelands that him and his crew had seen while filming. And so Frissell, along with his crew, boarded the SS Viking, a ship that was made famous by the movie and even more so by the events preceding this voyage. They embarked on their trip in early March of 1931 with the goal of obtaining more shots. And obtain more shots they did, capturing more of the icy scenery along with some apparently gruesome footage of real seal hunting. Their trip appeared to be coming to an end on March 13th, when their ship had gotten trapped between ice off the coast of Newfoundland. Frissell and his crew were trapped for nearly 2 days. And it was in those 2 days that they tried pretty much everything to free the ship. but their efforts were pointless, as any attempt to break the extremely thick ice was unsuccessful, leaving the crew to grow more and more hopeless as time ticked on. That is, until one of the crew remembered they had crates full of dynamite stored in the ship's powder room. Believing that they might be able to break the ice using this new explosive, the crew prepared the charges in the hopes of gaining their freedom. And this is where the story takes a horrific turn for the worst. While in the middle of preparing the dynamite, one of the crew accidentally ignited one while they were still inside of the powder room. This resulted in nearly all the 25 crates of dynamite to explode one after another, tearing apart not only the ship, but upwards of 27 men in the process. Reports from after the incident occurred express how no one's bodies, including the director, were ever found, believing that if the explosion didn't get them, then the freezing water below sure did. The Viking would eventually release months later and was met with less than stellar reviews, but what people were raving about was marveling at the extraordinary shots that the crew managed to get before their journey came to an abrupt end. This is Gregg Allman, an American musician best known for being one of the founding members of the Allman Brothers Band. He didn't reach this amount of success without an interesting life story, and like many celebrities do at some point, he put out an autobiography in 2012 titled My Cross to Bear. Allman didn't know it at the time, but by putting out that autobiography, he had just set someone's life on an unforgettable path. For the most part, the autobiography was well received and popular among fans of Allman, providing an intimate look at his entire musical career with many of life's personal challenges coming and going. The autobiography was such a hit that a movie titled Midnight Rider: The Gregg Allman Story was put into development around 2013. American film director Randall Miller and film producer Jody Savin announced a partnership with Open Road Films to bring a biopic to life based on Gregg Allman's My Cross to Bear. Prior to Midnight Rider, Randall Miller had previously directed a few film and television projects, but nothing could have prepared him for the disaster that lied ahead as the production for Midnight Rider began. One year after the initial announcement, Midnight Rider had a date set for its first day of filming, February 20th, 2014. The film crew is transported to a property that happens to have a CSX-owned railroad running straight through it. CSX, for those that are wondering, just happens to be a well-known freight train transportation company. And what this really means in the bigger span of things is that it was highly unlikely that they would shut down their trains just for this small film. Prior to being on set, the production team asked CSX for permission to shoot on their train tracks, to which the company had denied their requests twice. CSX has come out and outright explained this to media outlets, especially after what ended up happening. Despite the crew's denial of permission, Miller still made everyone get ready to shoot on sets of the train tracks. The shot involved the actor portraying Allman to be on a heavy hospital bed that was sat in the middle of the train tracks. But not just on any part of the tracks. Miller insisted on the shot being on top of what's known as a trestle. If you've ever seen those cool looking triangle structures, whether it be in movies or in real life, that is what a trestle is. This is important because it means that the only method of escape should a train come is to run to either end of the trestle, as jumping to the side would most certainly result in a long fall to your death. And if you're questioning, why were they even filming such a random assortment of things? Like, there's a man on a medical bed on top of train tracks. Like, what is actually going on here? Well, apparently this was part of a dream sequence involving the main character, which explains this little obscurity of the situation. What's been left unexplained, though, is Miller's carelessness when it came to filming this sequence. Because not only was he denied permission to film here, but he convinced everyone that it was okay to film directly on the trestle. And so the film was underway. The crew made their way deep into the train tracks. The camera was being set up to film. The leading man was in position. All that was left was to press record. Just then, a train came around the corner at nearly 60 miles per hour, leaving cast and crew with less than a minute to react and escape the barreling train coming their way. The footage you watched earlier is the real footage from the set. This is not a reenactment. This is what went down on that tragic day all those years ago. Of course, given their little amount of time to react, and given the fact that they only had one escape route, several people were injured, and one person was unable to get out at all. Camera assistant Sarah Jones was struck and killed instantly, while the other crew members suffered fractured bones and cuts from shrapnel sent toward them. The truly disgusting part of this production was evidence of the fact that they tried to immediately start the movie up again. As Philip Schuer wrote in his article from March 3rd, 2014, following the collision, producers requested a permit through the Savannah Film Office to film at a private home in the city next week. So basically, these producers caused the death of one crew member, and their first priority during the situation was to try and find a new location to film. Wild. What followed was a series of lawsuits and court cases against Randall Miller, his wife Jody Savin, and Jay Sedgren. And it's here that we really got to know these people, with Miller and Savin openly stating right after their detainment, in the weeks and months that follow, when the true facts of the events are revealed, people will know that this was not a crime. We never had criminal intent. We would never knowingly or intentionally put anybody's safety at risk. This was a horrible tragedy and a horrific accident. We will dedicate ourselves in the future to honoring Sarah's memory by promoting the safest work environment for everybody in the film industry. Humbly, Randy Miller and Jody Savin. And this story does not have a good ending, at least not in my opinion. Jody Savin got off scot-free for the most part. Jay Sedgren received 10 years of probation with a mere $10,000 fine, and Randall Miller only served a year of his initial 2-year sentence, getting off early with 8 years of probation, with the only upside being that he was banned from film production in any capacity. But that ban will only last 10 years, and seeing as we are nearing the 9th year, it's depressing to hear that these people's continued ignorance and negligence has, for the most part, gone unpunished. I have to say, this story reminded me a lot of the Vic Morrow incident in that I feel justice was not served. These are the kinds of stories that Hollywood loves for us to forget about, and it's the main reason why I chose to even begin this little series in the first place. And that will bring us to the end of today's video. I know this one was shot a little bit different. I'm just trying something new that I feel like will kind of keep the atmosphere in check. I feel like I've been kind of lacking that recently. I feel like I used to care a lot more about like stuff like this, where I would, set up my set and actually put care and thought into what was going to be on camera. So let me know if you guys enjoyed this below, and I'm going to keep doing this for you all. If not, obviously let me know that below too. So again, these stories are really hard to hear, and they're really incredibly hard to research. If you guys want to support me in my endeavors, feel free to join the Patreon, as this is going to bring us to the Patron Shoutout. If you are on screen, that means you are a tier 3 member, and I could not be more thankful. Like, honestly, thank you guys. It's been wonderful being able to not worry so much about, I guess, just bills in general. It's been awesome having a lot of support from you all, and more so recently, I've noticed a lot more people have joined the Patreon, and yeah, it's just awesome. I'm going to try and have more uncensored content, specifically in the next film accident video. I'm going to try and find some more that I can't really talk about on YouTube, because there is a few that I feel like if I talked about on here, I would definitely not get the video monetized. So I will be looking into that in my own time, I guess. But in the meantime, I just wanted to thank you all for like just staying loyal to the Patreon and really supporting the channel, because it is because of you that the channel is where it is now. So yeah, now with all that said, I will see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.